Welcome. Good afternoon. How is everybody doing? Good. I'm Janet Riccio. I am the Dean of Omnicom. You might have to get up here. It is such a pleasure to have you all here and to take the time out of your hectic lives to come on this very special event. First time ever, I believe, that we have had all 5 of our network CEOs on the stage together. And so I am thrilled that you're here.
Not sure the insurance covers it, actually.
It does. For those of you who are not familiar with Omni Women, we launched 2 years ago on April 1st, 2014, April Fool's Day. Today's the Ides of March. I don't know why we keep choosing dates like this. Our mission is to increase the influence and number of women in leadership positions across Omnicom Group agencies around the world. So, I will say something. I have never seen so many men at an Omni Women event, which is sort of great. This is what we want. Before I give it over to Diane Brady to start our panel discussion, I want to address an issue that came up many times in emails that I've received and that members of the governing body have received since the announcement and invitation went out about this panel. And it's all about casting. It's about 5 men talking about women in leadership. And there's some frustration and some borderline anger, and I get that, and I empathize with that. But I really want to stress this one thing. Without these partners, we are never going to fulfill the mission of Omni Women. This is not about us versus them. This is about us with them. And I think that these 5 men are highly enlightened males who understand the power and the business imperative of women in leadership positions. So with that, keep an open mind, keep an open heart. I think it's going to be a lively, fun discussion. Let me introduce Diane Brady, who is going to be our moderator today. Diane is an award-winning journalist, was with Bloomberg and Business Week. She is the author of a critically acclaimed book called Fraternity. She's been working with us for about 6 weeks on putting together what I think is a great flow of conversation. And then you're going to introduce, if they really do need it,
our enlightened gentleman.
Our enlightened
Thank
gentleman
you.
back here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
I think actually I don't need that, but I will say that one of the things that upends the normal protocol of women's conferences was I was going to share my story about my classy yet cool Marc Jacobs dress that I had in the dry cleaners that was not there this morning when I went to pick it up. And that's the kind of bonding experience you have with women. And also then the internal monologue of the outfit you do choose and the same sky bracelet that empowers women. But we are pioneers here, so thank you, enlightened gentlemen. Also, we cannot lament the lack of buy-in from the top because we have the top with us here today. So let me introduce our leaders. You know them well. At the far end, Andrew Robertson, the shy leader of BBDO. Dale Adams, Chairman CEO of DAS Group of Companies, or DAS. Chuck Breimer, I believe who's being separated from Andrew, of course, TV Worldwide. Daryl Sim, Chairman and CEO of Omnicom Media Group, and Troy Ruhanen, CEO, TVWA Worldwide. So I was going to give the description they had in Adweek, but we'll save that for later. I want to start with you because we've seen a lot of these campaigns take the lead, for example, which was not nostalgic. These were the words of women, in your agencies put into sort of the mouths and faces of men. Give me some sense as to the impact that's had, why you did it, why you turned such a harsh spotlight on yourself.
Well, firstly, I think we started the project about 14 months ago. When my first day at TBWA, I was given a sheet of paper to meet the 35 people you should call in the first week. And the truth is 3 of them were women. So for me, it was a little bit of like, oof. This has got to change. And so we started a program called 2020 where we really wanted to evaluate, because I really do believe that what gets measured gets done. And there was a lot of talk and a lot of philosophy going on. So what we really did is we set ourselves some benchmarks. And so over the last year, we've been going through every financial plan. People have to talk about the true numbers of change that are going on in terms of female leadership and where the track is going. And it happens by every office, by every region, and we really do track it down to several titles down. The problem was that I think we were rationally getting the conversation across. We weren't emotionally getting the conversation across, and so we felt like we needed to, if we talk about being the disruption company, we kind of needed to come at it from a different angle. And the real truth is, if you look at the convention of what's been going on with women's issues, is that it's women talking to women a lot of the time. It's a 3% conference. It's a lot of that. You go to Cannes, there are a lot of women's clubs. There's all these things that are going on there. And the real fact of the matter is that it's women's issues are everyone's issues. And if we're really going to change and really start to embrace the fact that 50% of the most talented people in the world are women, then you've got to make sure that the men who are driving a lot of these decisions right now start to create that change. So we did that campaign. I don't know if you saw it. We launched on International Women's Day, and it was good. It was, I'd say, widely received very positively. We had some markets do exactly what Janet just talked about, which is how come it's men talking about female issues. And the truth is, we did it purposely because it got conversation going. It really, first and foremost, was for my staff, not for the public. We really needed to internally to understand that we've got to get this change going, and we had 150 men from our company participate and get videoed, and we put it through all the social channels and everything else. So it got up to, it's close to a couple 100,000 in YouTube views right now. It's God knows how many times it was shared through Facebook, which is great, but the more important thing, we just had our global conference, and it's got everyone lined up and talking inside of our company and starting to embrace the mission. So job one is to make it a collective issue, not just a female issue. And the second thing is ultimately is to get emotionally people engaging on this topic, and we did, because some people didn't like it, and a lot of people did.
So I want to, and I know you've had other campaigns, Chuck, you've had your campaigns too, actually, that I can think of in terms of Better by Half and Talent Has No Gender. And one of the things about the emotions around women is I do feel sometimes like we just, our shoulders slump and we look at the ground, we're like, oh, women. And it's like, and we love our mothers, and we talk about work-life balance, and you sort of lose the men often at hello, and give me some sense as to how are you making this an inclusive, and I'm going to start, Andrew, I'm going to go down to the far end. Talk a little bit about bias, because you've got a very distinct culture at BBDO. It's a culture that has been a winning culture, yet it's a culture that has produced very few female leaders in the creative side.
Well, we decided we wanted to really zero in on a very specific problem in order to make a lot of progress on that rather than a little bit of progress against a broader agenda. And as my work wife, David Lubos, often says, facts are stubborn things. So we looked at the data, and if you look across our most senior ranks, so senior directors in account management, agency management, department heads, group planning directors and above, senior creative directors and executive creative directors. If you look across the country on that level, we're 46% female, 53% male. So you'd say that's pretty good, a 7% spread to close. But if you take out the creative function, we're 56% female, 44% male. So we have a massive distortion. And you then say, okay, why is that? And it is not because of late night working, lots of travel, unpredictable travel schedules, having to be in early and stay late. It's not for any of those reasons, because all of those things also apply to the people in account management and planning and production. So it's not that. And our conclusion, and David and I talked a lot about this, and he's owning this, so I'm going to fix this, but is that of all the functions that we have, the creative function is the most intuitive. That's what makes us good at it. Right. Yeah, I mean, there's some research that you can, at any one moment, there's 40 million pieces of data floating around in your head, and you can logically process 40 of them, which means you deal with all of the rest with unconscious bias, which, by the way, is what we do for a living. That's our job, is to make brands chosen through unconscious bias.
So how do you fix that? Because I feel like we all recognize excellence in a form that resembles ourselves, right?
I think there's three big things to do. The first is to be very deliberate about how you define the capabilities that are necessary to be a really good senior creative director or executive creative director, and then interview and, more importantly, assess against those criteria very deliberately. So to make it conscious. The second is to encourage, not just empower, encourage the whole organization to call bias, unconscious bias, when they see it. Because nobody's doing this because they're horrible people. I assume positive intent. I think people just don't know it's happening, and I've done the tests, and I know I do it as well.
You're biased in what way?
I did a whole series of these online tests, and for example, one of them tests whether you associate men with sciences and women with liberal arts, and I was as biased on that as the population is as a whole. It takes 10 minutes to do these tests. You should do it. You learn a lot
like
about
adding
yourself.
IQ points for a British accent.
Like that.
Sort of thing. For,
Or subtraction if you're Australian.
Australian.
One of the two. Yeah.
So Dale,
That's a very well. So first thing is structure for success. Define the capabilities you need. Second thing is call it out when you see it. And the third thing is actually just a behavioral intervention that you need to create for yourself, which is to challenge every decision you make and make yourself think through why you're making that decision. Possibly even write down the justification for the decision, because the fact of writing it down will force you to realize whether you're actually biasing it. And there's a lot that we can work with on that.
so I want to go, Dale, you actually, I believe, have the best record. Not that everybody here has got excellent records, but you have a very good record with women in leadership positions. Do you have a system in place? What's your secret? What secrets can you share with your colleagues here as to how you made it happen?
I don't have a system in place, and I think that to some extent, the way the DAS is different than the networks allows a little bit of a more opportunity, because I have more
than 200 agencies.
I have a lot of different brands that gives me a little bit more opportunity. I think Andrew talked about making sure that you take bias out of the equation, and I think intuitively that's what we've been doing. It's as I said earlier, it's you need to make the decision gender neutral, and I think that if you look at the population, you're going to start to gravitate towards more of a leveling of men versus women in leadership positions.
So I want to just stay on this for one quick second, because I do feel like we talk a lot about culture. When you've got more than 200 agencies or 60 brands, that seems like many cultures. Is that part of how we sort of broaden the script of what success looks like? Because when each of you thinks about culture, if you're not where you want to be, what would you change about your culture would be one of the questions. But I want to ask you, Dale, do you feel like you've got a wider sort of route to the top, perhaps, or having that many different types of brands helps?
Well, obviously, we've got a lot of different brands, and each one of those brands have their own unique culture, and a lot of great cultures within DAS. So I do think that allows us a little bit of flexibility. That if I'm one brand, I think it's a little bit more narrow.
So, Jack, I want to ask a little bit about, you've gone outside the company, you've obviously tried to develop a deep bench. When you're looking at how you promote talent, can we sort of, even pivot? I know it doesn't have to be Wendy specifically, but I am curious about how do you find your sourcing talent, especially as you start to think more strategically around women and global talent?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I think it comes from, there's not a either or, it's an and. I very much like to bring people within the organization up and to give people the opportunity to grow their careers inside of DDB. But equally, I think it's important for companies to get fresh blood, to get people who think a little bit differently, perhaps, than the way it's always been thought of before. I do get a lot of questions I get a lot of, sort of people feeding back on Wendy and the hire of Wendy. And as I've said many times, I said, we've got initiatives in place and have had initiatives in place and building on that much like these other folks, to raise the topic of more gender balance within our organization and to build strong female leadership. So it's great that we're able to take these steps. But Wendy Clark wasn't hired because she was a woman. You know, Wendy Clark was hired because of her talent. And like we like to say, talent has no gender. It also has no age. It has no sexual orientation. It has no ethnicity. And it doesn't matter where you go worship. I think talent is talent. And I think we need to make sure we respect that. This isn't about just going out and hiring women for the sake of hiring women. There's so many amazing, talented women that we can grow inside our organizations and we can bring in from the outside. But it starts with talent.
And why focus on women? I mean, of all the many priorities you have, you've got, you know, you want global diversity, you want, as you say, diversity of age. Is there does gender occupy a special place in your mind? Is there a reason why gender perhaps should get more focus than any of the other types of diversity you're trying to achieve?
Well, no, I think diversity in general is something that we're approaching. You know, there's a great expression, you know, great minds think alike. I also think what we need is great minds that think differently, you know, because I think the more people we have from different walks of life, from different, whether it be different genders or different ethnicities, as I said, or different ways of life, different cultural experiences. You can tell from my voice, I'm not English, you know, I come from Kentucky. So there you go, there's some diversity.
We add IQ points to that too.
Yeah, I know. I figured there's the bias coming in, I know. But I do believe that the more that you can bring that kind of collective thinking into an organization, the stronger the organization gets. It's about business at the end of the day. And you get great people thinking from different walks of life, thinking towards a solution, you'll generally get a better answer.
So I feel like I'm moving down the line here. We'll shake it up a bit. But so Daryl, I've heard you speak a lot about data-driven, you know, and programmatic. And we're moving, you know, you are on the front lines of sort of the technological changes. And we can get into the business model. That's a whole different question. But that would seem to be, in some ways, to create a tougher, you know, war for talent when you look at sort of women in technology. And yet, you know, I think you're doing very well on that front. So what can you give me some sense as to what you think have been some?
No, thanks for that question.
Yeah, well, I'm just like throwing you a softball.
Yeah, I know. I was feeling like Ben Carson there for a moment.
Hey, thanks for showing up. Yeah. And you know worldwide in your name.
When you look at the kind of the tech community, and not just in the agency space, but elsewhere, I mean, we all know what those stats look like in terms of women leadership and promotion in those organizations and how they profess to be struggling with it. And I got to tell you, in our business, where we have a lot of data and tech functions and organizations, whether it's analytics and Analect, whether it's programmatic, where it's search and social capabilities and things of that sort, we've made tremendous progress. And I think we're seriously damaging the notion that it's a boys' club in ad tech, and a lot of credit to that goes to the women that we have involved in this space. But our leadership, particularly in North America, is strongly focused with women leaders. I'll mention a few of them in a moment. 70% of the directors that we're hiring in our analytics functions are women, and our tech functions are women. We have a leadership of global programmatic is a woman, Megan Pagliuca. We're going to be announcing officially shortly that Erin Matz, who I see out there today, is going to be CEO of Analect North America. And she, let me tell you.
Is she aware of this promotion, or are you just promoting her from stage?
I'm playing to the crowd.
I play it last time, man.
No, Erin has worked in our business for, I guess, a decade or more, and she's been a real pro in this space. And she has
She can actually explain to you what it is.
which is always helpful, I find.
It's a big plus.
Clients tend to enjoy that. And actually explain.
What is there anything that you've sort of gleaned from sort of how you've managed? Obviously, women in key roles, you're not having them wear t-shirts.
I think there are two.
It.
This is not. I think it is a cultural thing that has to come from the top, and it's not necessarily, although it can be, setting objectives as you go. But I learned something from the women of Analect who, I asked the question very recently. How did this happen? How did we become so successful attracting women to analytics and tech roles and programmatic and things of that sort? And the answer that I got was really, really interesting. And it was essentially that when you're on the bleeding edge, there's no legacy to play off. You know, there's no, if you will, there's no Don Draper to play against. And you get to set the rules and you get to set kind of the game in that space. And that is very enticing to those women that operate in our data and tech roles. But I think, you know, I look at our business, and I'm a real believer that the role of leaders is changing both in our business and our clients' businesses. And it's much less a top-down business as it becomes more and more complex. And you've really got to provide across your flatter organization room for talent to thrive. And I think in a flatter organization, when you promote, as I like to say, some air to breathe, so that talent can breathe and really show what they can, how they can perform, it tends to correlate with more diversity in the organization and less of what you've seen in the past. And I think that's really worked for us.
So do any of your agency colleagues want to weigh in on the Don Draper legacy crushing down on? I mean, the outfits were great, but I would think that, is that something that you feel is an impediment in any way? It's a draw as much, isn't it? Create a certain, I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
It's a myth right now.
It's a myth.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you're right. You're the 60. Well, let me ask about the business model, because we're talking about this. We can't talk about gender in isolation of the other threats and issues that we talk about in the industry, you know, the death, disruption, whatever, you know, that we're dealing with. How do you think about this? You've had disruption as sort of your cry. Where does gender fit into it? How do you think that the model is changing in a way that may in fact require more diversity of all sorts? I mean,
So disruption is based upon the principle that there are a lot of conventions, and to disrupt you have to find the white space to grow. So I don't believe that you can have a very disruptive point of view if you're only looking through one lens. So the more diverse that we get as a collective group, and I'm with Chuck, that we're not just talking about one factor, and particularly in the United States and I think in the UK, we are much more of a, you know, sort of a melting pot. So we really do need to make sure that we've got a very diverse point of view in terms of the insights that we're gathering, the product development that we may want to go participate with. So it's naive to think that we could continue down a path of sort of sectionalizing and having sort of a one-point view in order to sort of gain, you know, the right sort of ideas. So I think the biggest factor, though, is that, you know, as we were sort of going across it, is that I think the ignorance is that we honestly don't know where the talent is. I think we're lazy when we really talk about how to go out there and find talent.
It's a pipeline problem? Is that what's lazy? How do you get beyond?
I think the real truth is, as an industry, and I don't mean Omnicom, I just mean the industry, doesn't actually work that hard at working to identify talent. It will go through headhunters, it will go through sort of topical PR, whatever else. And you know, there was a survey that was done recently where we looked at how many interviews did the number of CEOs have in the last, you know, month, and some were averaging one a week and some were averaging one a month. And so if you then really start to think about, okay, how many then are really going to be female candidates on that front, you're really narrowing your chances to know who the best talent is out there. So I think the obligation is to actually to lean into the issue, not to use that phrase, but to ultimately go out there and investigate and go and meet as many talented people that are diverse both in sex and in type. And
what unusual places? Where have you gone outside the realm of?
So we definitely, I think, you know, part of the issue with the creative, you know, number that Andrew was talking about is that our numbers, you know, it's low. I mean, it's you know, there's a 3% conference. Thank God we're well above that, but it's still low. And I think the problem is there are many more attractive industries for female creators. I just believe that there are many more places that they can go to get their interests exercised. And so we've been really leaning into design firms, into fashion, going to different areas to go source creative people, to go bring them into our culture. So, because what we tend to do is we tend to fish from the same pond and ultimately, you know, expecting a different result, and that's kind of mad. So I think we have to go further. I think we have to go more often. And I think we've got to go very open in terms of where that potential talent could be. And I think all of us are really good at being global and bringing talent from anywhere. I think, you know, obviously a couple of us are proof of, you know, networks that aren't that. So I think, you know, bringing them in from other countries, you know, obviously then pushing them back out and trying that. So experimentation is probably the biggest thing we've got to do.
So, Andrew, what are you doing in terms strategically to be getting more talent? And you talked a little bit about it from sort of the 30,000-foot view a little bit, but can you take us down the ground? Are you having more meetings more often?
I hope not. I hope we're not having any more meetings. No.
Stand up.
We're just, so having isolated this very specific issue, we're just attacking it we're going to double the percentage of female senior creative leadership in 12 months. And that will be done. And we've figured out the numbers. That'll be done by us hiring some people, and it'll be done by us actively looking to promote and develop some of the talent that we already have. Because if you can't see it, you can't be it. And we need to get that done really quickly to make it possible for the
Can
rest.
I challenge just one thing here, which is the optics of the important? I mean, nobody wants to be, the company that's in the newspaper with all white guy faces for the first 20, rows down. I understand that, but
let's not tweet this.
let's talk about the actual payoff and the bottom line. I mean, everybody talks about the business case for women. I always think it's like women on boards, the company performs better. And I was like, why does it have to perform better? Why can it just not perform worse? Like why do we have to meet a higher bar because, God, there's women, it better be 20% better. What is it that you're not getting? So let's talk about creative. And I'm going to go to you, and I'm going to go to all these. Share the Load, for example, is I thought a really emotional, wonderful campaign. I don't know if it was produced by a man or by a woman, but that's going to have a high impact, I'm sure, in India and elsewhere. It was wonderful. Is this because it's the right thing to do that you want women in senior roles? Do you feel like you're getting a lower quality of creative? Is it push from the clients? I mean, what?
Just try the opposite. Try the opposite point. Ruth Bader Ginsburg had this wonderful line. Somebody said to her, when will you be happy with the mix of the Supreme Court bench? And she said, when it's got 9 women on it. And he said, well, that's a little extreme, isn't it? And she said, well, nobody thought of that when there was 9 men.
But you don't know how good your creative.
So there's no logical reason that I can come up with why it should be anything other than 50-50.
But there's a certain if it ain't broke mentality
But it is
that always
broke.
kicks in. You always see women CEOs going into turnaround situations. You almost feel like the board was like, oh, well, I mean, let's just give her a chance because, it's a low. I don't know. Maybe I'm not being cynical. I'm an optimist by nature, but I do want to get a sense as to what payoff. How do you measure success other than having the women in senior roles? Are you seeing a payoff from these initiatives? I mean, from the type of creative you're getting?
I think you have to think of what's the right input and believe that you're going to get the outcome.
Yeah.
And I can't think of any logical reason why it wouldn't make more sense to have a 50-50 split. Therefore, if I focus on the input, maybe it's a leap of faith, but I'm pretty convinced the outcome will be improved. I can't think of any other.
Well, we're starting to see more clients talk about it. Have you felt like there's been situations where clients have even raised the fact that, gee, why am I sitting talking to 4 men for this, or anything like that, that perhaps might suggest there's a business case?
I think there's a strong business case for it. When you look at the clients that we have, if we put aside just that it's the right thing to do, and the reality is that we're dealing at 2 levels in different ways than we had before that for selfish reasons make it the right thing to do. They're at a client level, we're dealing with a more diverse group of clients that have expectations, have women leaders, and we need to reflect that. We need to be ahead of it. I'm not convinced we are ahead of it, but we need to reflect it in order to be responsive to them and have, from a diversity standpoint, not just from a gender standpoint, a diversity standpoint, the right minds, the right connections in the room. And then from a consumer standpoint, we are not dealing in certainly when I talk about Omnicom Media Group and the business that we do, we're not dealing with just simple, blunt media behemoths anymore. We're dealing with a very social, personalized, addressable environment, and we need all of the diversity that we can muster in order to understand what all those touch points are that are relevant to different kinds of people and different kinds of situations that can bring those ideas to life. And it just can't be done in the way that it was without diversity. It won't happen. It doesn't happen without it.
One of the things that's interesting, this is a room of senior people, and there's a lot of initiatives around bringing talent in. There's a lot of initiatives certainly around thinking about retention. Do you have any programs in place in terms of, not programs, but in terms of your thinking around senior women? Like, put myself in a role, hi, let's start, hi, I'm a 23-year-old woman, what advice do you have to me? But let's first start with, say, hi, I'm a 43-year-old woman, and I'm poised for leadership. I'm leaning in, I'm doing everything I want. What's your advice to me? How do I sort of break through versus perhaps leave for a bigger opportunity in another realm, client side or somewhere else?
You're looking at
I'm
me?
looking at you. I mean, you're doing, I mean, what's your, I mean,
I got a role for you right now, so.
That'd be equitable.
but what would be, what do you, how do you think about sort of that top layer? Because that's your pipeline for these roles we're talking about here.
Yeah. Well, first of all, if you fill those roles, they will bring others with them. And I think that's really important. I think it starts really at the top, not just at the bottom. We've talked a lot about our ratios and how well that's working out. But if we don't walk the talk, if we don't make moves to put senior female leadership into our organizations, I don't think the rest will follow. I think we have to start at a higher level. And I think we want to be able to provide training inside our organizations. You mentioned unconscious bias. We actually have at DDB unconscious bias training that's starting so that people inside the organization.
Have you done it yourself?
Not yet,
Oh.
but I'm on the agenda to do it, yeah. Where people who take this are going to be able to basically look at the situation hopefully differently. And again, not just gender-based, but all about diversity. But unconscious bias is training people to think differently about what they've always thought in the past, whether it's science versus liberal arts or whatever it may be in your head. And try to get people to think about it more on a clean sheet of paper and who's the best talent based on who that person is and what they can bring. But I do think you have to make some steps to change. You do need to make some senior appointments. You need to push some things out in order to get the rest to follow. You know, it's funny, you were talking about the consumer, Daryl. I was reading where 80% of all purchase decisions are either made or influenced by women. And yet, the creative departments are men. The people that are creating the ideas to bring that idea forward to that population are being driven by men. Now, some, that's fine. But to have that disparity in our ranks just doesn't add up for business as much as anything else.
I love the study where it's some high percentage of products that are marketed to women are more expensive than the equivalent identical products for men. Basically, like, you know, his and hers deodorant, she pays more, he pays less, she earns less, he pays less. So it's, I mean, one of the challenges, of course, is the kinds of marketing messages. And we are going to go to questions from the audience, by the way. So if you have questions, I think there's mics somewhere, but I want to, it's almost like the zeitgeist. We've seen female empowerment sell everything from soap to maxi pads to, you know, lots and lots of stuff around female empowerment. You mentioned Lean In. You know, is it, how are you feeling about sort of like, is there actual momentum? Do you feel, you all think about the zeitgeist? You know, you talk a lot about sort of capturing the culture and sort of how the female consumer is thinking. Is this something that is actually important, do you think, to sort of be proselytizing as your messages? I mean, I've mentioned Share the Load. You've had a number of campaigns. I guess I'm trying to get a sense as to, are we at a tipping point where we really are going to see significant change? Because we've been talking about this stuff for quite some time.
I think we do a pretty good job of it for our clients. We haven't fixed our own house, is my honest view. I think we can look out and see the opportunity and do a Share the Load or Barbie or you know, Pantene. We can do those. We just need to really, really focus on what we can manage and fix for ourselves. And I think we don't apply the same level of conscious rigor to that as we do to what we're doing for our clients.
I think we are at a tipping point. I mean, and the tipping point is driven by the environment around us. And that the structures, the way we worked, the legacy that you know, did undoubtedly get in the way of women moving through organizations as well as they might have otherwise. Those legacies are being broken down by the environment that we're working in. I think for that reason we are at a change point not only in terms of what we need to do, but change point in terms of opportunity here. Just as I was speaking earlier about kind of our ad tech space, I think there's a real opportunity because those legacies and those benchmarks are disappearing really all around us. It's like a fluid environment. I think it creates great opportunity for us.
I think it's really important that we don't get stuck into the trap of thinking it's because people feel directly empathetic with a particular audience. I really don't want to get to a point, and I know we've talked to you know, female creative directors about what they hate, and one of the things that happens is they go, oh, put put her on all the women's brands. Put her on the Sampro. Put her on the washing. You know, that happens, and that's another form of bias that I don't want to see. I want to see men creating share the load work in India, and I want to see women creating great beer campaigns or great car campaigns. The point is not to just empathize. The point is to make sure that we're unbiased and that you're getting proper, objective focus.
Doug, you're leaning in.
No, I was just going to say, I agree. One of the things that's interesting, I mean, we're talking a lot about, you know, sort of men opening the doors. And I don't necessarily see it that way. I think women are very much a part of opening the doors for women. This is probably a little bit provocative. I'll probably regret it. But you know, years ago, and I think this has changed, and I'm so happy it's changed, but I think one of the biggest issues for women's growth and leadership was women. It was women pushing back against other. I used to see it in the organization, you know, and maybe it was from where you'd walk into a room and you'd see, you know, 10 chairs of men and 3 chairs of women and think those 3 women are who I need to compete with in order to move forward. And I remember so many times this sort of backbiting going on, and that seems to have shifted dramatically in the last few years. You're seeing women now starting to support other women, which is fantastic. You're seeing this empowerment movement, and I don't mean that in a trite way, but really starting to take hold, where women are beginning to support other women. And I think it's important for all the women that work in our organizations to take lead roles in helping to drive a greater gender equality in all of our areas.
Well, and mentoring, you talked a lot about mentoring and familiarity. I mean, you worked with Wendy 15 years ago, didn't you? With
Yeah, I did.
AT&T. So
Wendy
like
here
you
somewhere?
knew a long time, well, or some period when you were all hitting puberty. But
Yeah.
I think that's very important as something to talk about mentoring. And I want to talk, and do we have questions? If you just raise your hand if you have questions, because we'll just incorporate them. But I feel like when we talk about leadership, you've got leaders in the audience. What advice do you have to them? What do you want to see them do? I mean, in terms of specific behaviors, I think it's good to walk away with some actual specificity around how you move the needle. Because again, we all love women, we love men, we want to see change, but there's a big distance between how it actually happens. So I'm looking at you. So
Okay. So I'd say 2 actions probably. I'd say we're a pretty conservative business for all the talk that we have. We actually move really slowly. So I think, you know, we're best when we actually face a crisis. So we tend to be really good once we're fired. So I would,
fire
yeah,
everybody and
no,
then
I think you have to create your own crisis. I mean, that's the honest truth. We're really good when we kind of put ourselves under the hammer on something. We're really good when we're new business or whatever else. So you got to put yourself under duress and actually recognize that this is an issue and it needs to quicken. So I think go back and kind of create your crisis and get there faster, because you're unbelievably slow.
have you done that? Have you done
Yeah,
that
so
on behalf of
we are really, you don't understand how much we beat it into them. We do, because it's really easy to avoid it because there's so many other things to do. And so, you know, it has to come from me, and it has to come from the finance director, it has to come from everyone. And it really does. I mean, I know these guys and I know their commitment as well. It has to come from the top, so you have to do that. And then the last thing I'd just say from more of a personal anecdote, I mean, in terms of as you rise through leadership, I think you really have to act authentically. I don't think you can adopt a character. I think that's the real issue. I see a lot of people, I made mistakes, I definitely would say, along the way, where I felt like the strategy to get to somewhere was building advocacy, getting as many followers, and having people behind me was maybe the way in which I would get there. I think it's much more you've got to show the way, and you have to demonstrate the very best of you. And I think acting as authentically as you can about that to really demonstrate the way forward and how you think things need to be done. Because there's a great quote that I think Andy said, which is, be the change you want to be. And I think that that's really what you got to do. You got to lead by example. You don't need others to support you to do that. I think you just have to demonstrate that. And so my encouragement is go back, and if you want the change to happen, go make the change happen.
Anybody got advice for
Yeah,
the?
I think, I mean, I reflect on, I had the great luxury and pleasure of my first boss was a woman. Her name was Marion Grant. And when I was 24 years old, she was probably 30, and I, you know, thought she was up on a hill. But
Not over the hill.
Not over the hill,
Right.
up on a
Okay,
hill.
good.
Yeah, exactly. She was
Clarify.
someone to look up to, and the fountain of all knowledge. But Marion, this was at the Procter & Gamble company, and I was, all of 24. But it was a great experience to have a woman as my first boss in that environment, and probably melted away a lot of feelings I might have otherwise had, or a lot of myths and preconceptions I might have otherwise had. But she taught me something really, really important about moving ahead. And you have to be a little bit bold, but not crazy. And what you have to do is you have to replace yourself. If you're good at what you do and you have confidence, you have to have the confidence to replace yourself. That's the most important and valuable thing you can do for the company. If you're valuable and you have the skills and the ability to move higher in the organization, the first step there is to replace what you do. In a client service business, when we think that no one can be moved because the client relationship will fall apart, or we couldn't possibly move that person out of that function because they work so well in the room, the most important thing is to mentor, develop, and replace yourself. And it'll be a great favor to those at the lowest levels in the organization, and it'll be a great payoff both to yourself and our total organizations to have more leaders coming up.
I like that fine line between bold and crazy.
Yeah.
It's good. So advice.
Yeah,
I work for you. What advice do you have for me? I want to replace you someday. How do
Be
they
careful
do
what you ask for.
or move up.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think the advice I would give is show commitment. There's this. We talk a lot about life-work balances. I'm not sure that's the right words, because I don't think anything's balanced 50-50. I think it's more about integrating and integration and life-work integration. And I think you don't have to give up either to be successful, particularly when you're talking about gender. So many women are faced with a lot of issues that guys don't have when they go home in the afternoons or in the evenings or whenever. And I think it's really important that we provide the opportunity for success with those other life, issues that one has, family, whatever, husbands or wives, on both sides, by the way.
Do you think we've done a disservice, Chuck, or anybody else, on the whole work-life balance? Because it is a legitimate issue. I mean, look,
Sure.
we have children. I love my children. I couldn't wait to get back from maternity leave. It's like the most tiring period of my life. It's like, I got to go back to work. I'm sorry. People learn how to cook. I love you. Go. But yet we talk about work-life balance is not something that you get in a top role. So you talk about integration. How should we be thinking about it?
Well, I mean, I got 3 daughters, so I run to work in the morning. So, no, I think it's, look, there's no perfect world here. I mean, we all work. This is an industry that works incredibly hard. It's a service industry, and any service industry requires lots of hours. So I think everybody's bought into that, or they wouldn't be here, because you get that smacked to you right in the face probably in your first week. I think the challenge is, how do we provide a platform for people to succeed in our environment and still have a life? And that's always a challenge. It's certainly a challenge, I know, for everybody on the stage, and it's a challenge for everybody in this audience. And I think we don't have a perfect answer to that yet. But I don't think it's trying to coordinate some sort of 50-50 world or balanced world. I think it's more about intertwining, your work life, and to a degree your personal life, so that you make sure you give yourself ample time to be able to.
I think Andrew, you turn off on weekends, right?
It's last week. I was interviewed at the Facebook Global Marketing Solutions Conference. 4,000 people from Facebook around the world, and the person who was interviewing me asked me how I'd coped with my work-life balance over the years. And the answer was, I basically made a decision long ago that 5 a.m. on Monday morning till 8 p.m. on Friday night belonged to the company, and as much as possible weekends belonged to the family. That was the split. But what really struck me about the question was, it was the first time I've ever been asked it. The first time I've ever been asked it.
Is it the first time you'd thought about it?
No, no. I think about it a lot late at night when I can't sleep. But when I commented afterwards about the fact that that was the first time I'd ever been asked the question, the person who interviewed me said, well, last year we had, and he named a female CEO, who we interviewed, and when I asked her the question, she said, the women's question.
So it's true. It's like we write articles, we put their fertility and footwear in the first paragraph, and then we wonder why they don't call us back. It's like, come on,
Yeah.
how many kids do you have? You know.
We're all biased.
I want to take questions from the audience. If you do have any, I guess you can raise your hands, and there are mics here, or you can project and identify yourself so that your boss knows who's speaking.
So the mics are coming down the aisle. If you'd kindly raise your hand if you have a question, the mics will come out to you
Here's
right
a
here in the front.
question.
It's a question for Dale.
Hey, Karen.
Hi, I have two questions actually. The one is you talked about the search for talent, and obviously we talked about work-life balance or whatever we call it. The need for flexibility and different solutions is really key. So I'd like everybody to comment on that. And then I know that my boss has a very personal story why he's so committed to women that he didn't tell. So I'm going to challenge him to tell that story.
Okay, Dale. Dale, yes.
I always, when I'm between these two guys, I rarely get a word in, but because they're so eloquent in the way they talk. Thanks, Karen, for embarrassing me. Now, many of you know me. Actually, I come from a large family. I'm one of 10 kids. I have 4 sisters. I actually have 15 nieces and 10 grandnieces. And so when Diane was when I talked to her on the phone originally, she asked me about the initiative to improve the balance of women in the workforce, and I told her that it's not a business initiative for me; it's a personal initiative for me, and it is because each one of these women in my life are very special, and I want to make sure that each one of them have the opportunity to fulfill their destiny and what they want to do without gender bias, and I can't expect that to happen elsewhere unless it starts to happen here.
Very good.
What about the broader question?
What was the other question? That's much, much better.
Flexibility.
The importance of
versus
flexibility
balance.
and face
Flexibility versus.
I think we collectively, compared to a lot of other industries, do a pretty good job on that. We have a creative director, Jessica Coulter, who lives in LA with young twins. She lives in LA and works for BBDO New York. And when I was talking to her a couple of weeks ago, and I said, "What is it? Why do you like your job?" And she said, "Because I get to live in LA, work for BBDO New York, and I get paid for making fart jokes."
Yes, sign me up.
So I think we're, compared to a lot of industries, we're probably doing a reasonably good job on creating as much flexibility as we can.
When we always talk about flexibility in the context of the geographic flexibility, are there perhaps other
It's
forms
time,
of
time as well. I mean, I think some people will start late and work late. Some people will start early and finish early. Some people do a bit of them at the beginning, a bit in the middle, and a bit very late. The geographic thing is I think we're okay on it. I think that that isn't. I honestly don't believe that's our problem. I believe our problem is this unconscious bias, which just creates massive skews the further up the tree you get.
Yeah.
To that point, I just, at the risk of pandering, Janet, I want to thank you for putting this group together because, speaking personally, in my case, just the fact that we're having this panel in front of all of you raises our awareness to in areas where we might have unconscious bias already. You tend to talk to a lot of women in the company in ways that you might not otherwise when you're preparing for something like this, or when you're hearing about the initiatives. To be honest, when
What
Mm-hmm.
you hear about
surprised you? What did you?
well, I
really
think that
like?
you as you go through I'll tell you that as I've talked about diversity councils that we've put together, some of these as a result of initiatives like this. They make you aware, and sometimes you walk out of a meeting or you walk out of a session and you go, "Whoops! How did that? Was that on purpose, or were we just unconscious when that happened?" I'll give you an example. So I was talking earlier about how proud we are of the progress we're making in data and tech. And we had a session at CES that was very successful. And some of us walked out of the room with a whoops, it was all guys on the, on the stage. And that might have just in the past passed by us. It was, it was successful, but it gave you that pause of, wait, how did that happen?
Yeah.
How did that happen? Yeah. What did we do to make that happen? And it certainly is making me much more conscious of just what we're doing every day, and in a way that maybe I wouldn't be to the same level if it wasn't for the awareness that's being built.
I think that signaling point is really important, because we don't. And actually, the worst thing about being senior is nobody calls you out on it.
Yeah.
But it's like Omni
tells you
Women
the
and
truth.
diversity. It's, I think of that Reagan line, "Hi, I'm from Omni Women, I'm here to help," sort of thing. I mean, diversity councils and such tend to sometimes not always have a great rep with women. They don't want to join the women's network because they feel like it's essentially, something extra they have to do. That do you feel the connotations are quite different? And what value do you hope Omni Women brings to the conversation?
I think most women don't want to join them because they're not effective.
Yeah.
That's the real
Is
truth.
this one effective?
I have no
Here
idea.
you are.
You'll tell us later on. But
Well, how can it be more effective?
no, because I don't think that there is generally a committed action at the end of most of these events. There's not a real strategy against it. More times than not, it's an admiration of the problem. And I think you've got to really get down to it and kind of say, what the hell are we here to do? Are we committed to doing this? What action do we need to take? And who are we going to go get to do it?
So we'll get targets from all of you.
No, but I also think it's, you want to talk about diversity, then make it diverse.
Yeah, no,
and make it inclusive.
true.
Some of us have targets, haven't we? I mean, I think we've established, I know at DDB, I think, Sally's here somewhere, I think 30% of our C-level positions now are women. And our goal is to hit 40% in the next 18 to 24 months.
And it's amazing how it can happen. I mean, I'm Canadian. Justin Trudeau says half of my cabinet's women. It's like, boom, oh, there they
There
are.
they are.
Look, half of them. Wow.
Yeah.
How
But the
did that
point is,
happen?
I
Magic.
think you've got to act. If we all walk out of here and go, great, let's come back next year and we'll all have a nice chat, nothing will happen. We have to act. And it's really watching your feet and not your mouth.
That's
right?
true.
So making it work. So.
Are there other questions to? Hi.
I want to walk over here just because I think it's rude to have my whole back to the audience. Hi, I'm Lauren Battani-Wright. I'm Managing Director of the Cyanomics Group. Good to see you, Dale. And I appreciate you all being here and your input on leading by example and creating a culture of balance and diversity is well taken. I also think it's a very strong competitive advantage across most industries, if not all. My thoughts as a leader in one of the many Omnicom companies, I have to tell you that I'm here because the woman who recruited me made it very clear that that was her mission in terms of identifying incredibly smart, highly motivated, intelligent women, if I do say so myself, which recruited me, Denise Baglieri. And anyone who knows her knows that she's someone who, you don't watch her mouth, you can hear it, but she walks the walk. My question to you as a leader at one of these many agencies, particularly as a woman of color, what I struggle with sometimes, and I'm sure this is not unique to being a woman or a male leader, I do find that there is quite a bit of heavy lifting with some of the younger women to make them feel empowered, and they have many female examples, but to do a little less of their own browbeating and self-analysis. They can be incredibly overly self-critical. I know I'm making blanket statements, but particularly of the younger generation, because we also have a culture of promoting from within, that I don't necessarily see from their counterparts who are male. Developing male professionals has its own challenges and requirements, but with the women, I find there's quite a number of internal professional struggles, not so much about work-life balance. From your leadership stance, particularly as a panel of all very successful male CEOs, what are your thoughts or what's your recommendation in terms of continuing to develop a culture of success and promotion from within that will empower people, particularly women, to feel more stronger that they have a vested interest in the success of their companies.
Do you see a gender difference in the young sort of millennial workers that, thank you.
I think you see a difference in millennials at large, but
male and female.
There's no question about that in terms of things of balance. I think I think what you describe resonates with me, and I think that if you look, women who enter, to me, women that I look at my daughter, daughter's 25. Who has entered the workforce a couple of years ago, and we talk about this occasionally, about women moving forward in their early stages of their career versus men moving forward. I think that, and it resonates with me, some of the the browbeating that you're talking about. To me, if you really look at the average, I would say, male that enters our organization versus the average woman that enters the organization, there are, and I hate to generalize, differences in that can provide women, should provide women an important advantage in terms of moving ahead. And what I'm speaking with is the average maturity level of a woman when they enter the organization compared to their male counterpart of that age. There tends to be a difference. I'll just observe that. So there's a great.
Is immaturity something that holds you back?
Well, that's a fair point. Maybe there's something in that. But to me, particularly it should apply to the whole organization, but it's particularly incumbent on those of you that are really passionate about this. And I think mentorship of those women is absolutely key for them to build confidence. All right, we have to mentor them and show them the path and give them the confidence to move forward in an organization they may see in a certain way, or they may see competitive pressures. They may see that, hey, this is how this organization has performed over the past decade. Is this really the right place for me? And yes, it's important that as leaders we create that environment. But I think as this group, as a real passion point for that, I think mentorship needs to be turned up to a higher volume amongst this group. We're looking at it. We've had great success in a number of markets, the UK, Canada in particular, in terms of mentorship programs. We have them everywhere, but in those where the volume is really turned up, we have a higher level of success when we look at the metrics of women succeeding in management. And I think it's just extremely important for you as a leader, just as you were helped, for that to be done more systematically.
Also interesting to think, you want the men in the audience to feel like, hey, your career can still do a lot here, so it's not all, but you do want to put the focus on women, because that's how some of these initiatives, even like Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. It's like, no, we're trying to address some specific disadvantages here. We have to sum up, unfortunately, so I'm going to ask, please, we can continue the conversation, of course, in the hall, et cetera, but I'd like to do, I'd be remiss not to do sort of a lightning round with each of you in terms of some final thoughts, haikus, poems, songs, whatever you want to do, to leave memorable thoughts. Andrew, I'm going to start with you.
I'm feeling the same way.
Yeah, I would just say, and the signaling thing is really important, and it really doesn't matter what you think you said. What matters is what they think they heard. And I had a personal experience of this. A colleague was going to take on a job, and I said to her, are you going to be okay with the travel? And I thought I was saying, I care about you and your life, and is that really what you want to do? And what she heard was, you're not going to be very effective at this job.
Good point.
And you really have to over-index on this.
Okay.
I think that we've talked a lot about unconscious bias, and I have a little bit different view of it. We have to challenge our perceptions. We have the CEO of Fleishman-Hillard, John Saunders, had to name an account lead for the General Motors account, and everyone in his organization said you had to pick a man. John Saunders didn't listen to that. He said, why? And he went to General Motors and asked them. They thought the whole concept of assigning only men to the account was ludicrous, and therefore he assigned the woman that he wanted to run the account. So we have to continue to challenge our perceptions of what we believe, You know, a lot of people talk about, you know, searching for the truth. Many of you in the audience have heard me say this before, but I'm always searching for the lie that I believe. So what we need to do is to continue to challenge our perceptions of the way things are, of what we think is the truth, and see if it's actually a lie that we believe. When I was talking to you on the phone, Diane, one of the statements that was going to come out of my mouth, and that I held back because I wondered if it's the lie that I believed, was my statement was, I think if you asked any DAS company, any woman in a DAS company, the way the company is today, do you perceive that it is not possible for a woman to be the CEO of that company? And the perception I have is that everyone, that every DAS company would say that they could perceive a woman being the CEO of the company. So I guess I'll end with anybody that's a DAS company, that if you have your company, you do not perceive that the CEO of that company could be a woman, could you raise your hands? So I can,
yeah, good luck with
so
that.
I can see if it's
Okay.
Yeah.
Chuck,
Just jump past that.
But or ultimately, you know, text me and tell me, because I definitely want to know if it's the lie that I believe.
The lie that you believe.
fair enough.
I always say just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean there's somebody not trying to get me. So it's
That's
kind of
right.
the same thing. Trying the same thing. Final thoughts. First of all, I think, you know, this is great because this puts a spotlight on something that we need to move the needle forward on. I guess the goal of this is that you look out in a number of years and you don't need to do this, right? Because but I guess the final point I would throw in is that, you know, diversity in general, of which gender is part of it, is the right thing to do, because I think we owe it to our companies and the cultures that we create in our organizations. But I also think it's good for business. As I said earlier, you know, people coming from different places with different minds, thinking perhaps in different ways, will help our clients as well as help our own organization. So we owe it to ourselves to do so.
Okay, great. Daryl?
Yeah, I think that, you know, what I would say, and I think I speak for everyone on this panel, is we want to hear it. Okay, so we, I think as Andrew acknowledged earlier on in this conversation, so we're leaders of reasonably sized organizations, and believe me, the good news gets to us fast, the bad news not so fast. Yeah. And they're large organizations, and what we want to make sure is that we're delivering on diversity, and that we don't have anything that blocks the path to diversity, that A, because it's the right thing to do, and B, because it's the right thing for our business. And I think, certainly speaking for me, and as I said, I think everyone, our doors are open, and we want to hear from the people that are passionate about this when they believe that there's a blockage or there's something taking place in the organization that is getting in the way of achieving that diversity. Yeah. So reach out, let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I would say ask for feedback. I think if you were to ask a really honest question, say how many of you had an evaluation or given evaluations to all the people you should have in the last 12 months, the number wouldn't be as solid as what it should be. So I think it's incumbent upon you to ask for feedback in terms of what do I need to do to develop, and I think you have to give feedback directly to the people, honest to a fault, to be able to tell them and guide them about what they need to do and how to mentor them to get there. I think we're incredibly bad at giving evaluations. I think our evaluations are too long. And we've actually just looked at our evaluation form. We've changed our evaluation form to one question. Because it'll probably, no, it's what level of impact are you having on the business? Because ultimately, we just need to get to these evaluations done, and we need the feedback mechanism to happen. I think some of them are just far too long. I mean, I don't want to fill them all in myself. I don't want to. Right. But I think the most important thing is to give feedback and ask for feedback. And I think you're not going to get anywhere unless you do that. So.
Great, and everybody who wants to raise, raise your hand. So thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our leaders. And I'm going to turn it over to Candy for the last word.
We are going to convene, and we're going to have cocktails outside with some hors d'oeuvres. We had a hard stop because a couple of our CEOs have flights at 8 o'clock at JFK. So there'll be, that would be Daryl. But I want to just thank all of you for the enlightening conversation, for giving us an action plan, because I agree with you 100%. I think many times we're just admiring the problems and not coming to actions. And I think that last statement from all of you gave us something to do. So they want you to tell them. Tell them. Okay? See you outside. Thank you.